We headed to Naples, a vibrant, chaotic, and historic city set along Italy's southwestern coast, with views of the sea and Mount Vesuvius rising in the distance. Our apartment location was great, right in the heart of it all, but in an effort to stick to the budget, the space itself was pretty tiny. It had a few other issues, and let's just say it wasn't exactly our favorite stay. The next morning, we headed to the incredible Cappella San Severo, a small 18th century chapel packed with some of the most mind-blowing sculptures you'll ever see. Unfortunately, no photos are allowed inside, so these are a few stock shots, but even these barely scratch the surface. Seeing the veiled Christ in person is like something else entirely. The way the marble looks like a sheer veil draped over the body is almost impossible to comprehend. And then there's the fisherman's net, also carved from marble, so delicate and detailed, it feels like it could unravel at any second. Even the ceiling is a masterpiece, painted with vivid colors that have held up remarkably well over time, much of it due to the innovation of Raimondo de Sangro, the eclectic nobleman behind it all. Afterwards, we explored more of Naples, wandering through the bustling streets and taking in the beautiful architecture around every corner. We stopped to try a sfogliatella, a classic Neapolitan pastry with super thin, crispy layers that look almost like a seashell. It's filled with a lightly sweet ricotta mixture, flaky on the outside, soft and rich on the inside, and absolutely delicious. We met a local gentleman who pointed us towards the nearby Christmas street, famous for its handicrafted nativity scenes with tiny, detailed figurines ranging from traditional biblical characters to modern-day celebrities and politicians. He also recommended we visit the nearby Naples Cathedral, and we're glad we did. The interior is beautiful with high, decorated ceilings, ornate altars, and that grand cathedral feel. But the main draw here is the treasure of San Gennaro, whose dried blood is said to liquefy on specific dates each year. It wasn't on display while we were there, but still a fascinating piece of local tradition. We also explored the beautiful Completo Monumentale de Santa Chiara, taking in the colorful stained glass and the peaceful atmosphere inside. One of the highlights was the impressive altar dedicated to Francis of Assisi, rich with detail and a quiet sense of reverence that really stood out in the space. We headed into the cloister at Completo Monumentale de Santa Chiara, the spot with those iconic, colorful tiled columns you may have seen photos of. From there, we wandered through the museum section, which gives a deeper look into the complex's long history, from its 14th century origins to the damage it suffered during World War II and the careful restoration that followed. We made our way into the archaeological area where you can actually see layers of ancient Naples beneath the complex. Parts of a Roman bath complex have been uncovered here, and work is still ongoing, which is pretty incredible to witness. And finally, we slowed things down in the courtyard, soaking up the sunshine and just enjoying those beautiful tiled columns and benches. The cloister was redesigned in the 18th century with these hand-painted maiolica tiles wrapping around the columns and benches, depicting scenes of nature, countryside life, and floral patterns. One of those peaceful spots you just don't want to rush through. We wandered the streets and stumbled on this unique little setup, a spot where your order gets lowered down to you in a wicker basket from a few stories up above. Pretty practical and kind of amazing to watch. Only in Naples. And then finally, it was time for our first Neapolitan pizza. Soft, chewy crust and simple, fresh ingredients. So iconic and so delicious. To make our way back through the steep, winding streets of Naples, we tried out the funicular. It's part of the city's regular public transport system, just like a bus or metro, but designed specifically for Naples' famously hilly terrain. Naples actually has one of the largest funicular networks in the world, with several lines connecting the lower city to higher neighborhoods. They've been in operation since the early 1900s, and it was definitely a welcome break for our legs after a full day of exploring.
So we wanted to visit Pompeii, and that was going to cost about 20 euro, which is 23.50 US. So we decided to go with this Campania 3-day pass and downloaded this art card app, and it gives us a 3-day pass for two free entries to Pompeii, but also the Archaeological Museum.
You can choose a couple different things.
Yep.
And those were the two that we're going to choose. And those are each going to be 20 euros. So that pretty much covers the cost of the card right there.
Plus, and in addition to that, we get free transportation in the city and all the way to Pompeii, where that's at.
Which was close to an hour on a train, and you can use it on the metro and the buses and everything for those 3 days.
Yeah. So it's going to work out really beneficial for us. I think we're going to save some money on that. But
And then in addition, anything else you do in those 3 days that's on the list, you get 50% off of entry to that. So seems like a pretty good deal for us.
Yeah.
The next morning, we walked a short distance down the hill and used our pass to enter the National Archaeological Museum of Naples, one of the most important archaeological museums in the world. It's especially famous for its incredible collection of artifacts from nearby Pompeii and Herculaneum, preserving everyday objects, sculptures, frescoes, and mosaics from Roman life, frozen in time after the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. The statue collection is massive, and one of my favorites was a huge statue of a muse, towering, elegant, and impressive in scale. Upstairs, we reached the mosaics exhibit, and it was one of the highlights. The craftsmanship is unbelievable, with tiny tesserae pieces arranged into incredibly detailed scenes, portraits, and patterns. Up close, you really start to appreciate just how much precision and patience went into creating them. Continuing upward, we entered the grand main hall, with its stunning high ceilings, richly decorated with ornate plasterwork, frescoes, and gilded details that make the space feel almost palatial. We also saw the famous scale model of Pompeii, which was especially fascinating knowing we will be visiting the site soon. It gives you a sense of the layout and scale of the city before it was buried, lending even more gravity to our upcoming visit. Then it was time for pasta. We found a well-reviewed takeaway spot and went for a mix of classics, carbonara and pesto. Not strictly local to Naples, but perfect after a long morning of walking. We enjoyed our budget-friendly food and the gorgeous spring weather on a nearby bench. What better way to follow it up than some serious people watching and some Aperol spritzes in a lovely sunny plaza nearby. The next morning, we squeezed onto a crowded metro, then transferred to an even more crowded train, heading out of the city for about 45 minutes to reach the Pompeii Archaeological Park. It's one of the most famous archaeological sites in the world, and for good reason. This was once a thriving Roman city until 79 AD, when the eruption of Mount Vesuvius buried it under ash and pumice, preserving it almost like a time capsule of everyday life. Vesuvius still looms in the distance, quiet now but very much active, and a constant reminder of the force that both destroyed and preserved this incredible place. Walking through the Forum, you really get a sense of how central it was to daily life. This was the main public square surrounded by temples, markets, and civic buildings where people gathered to trade, socialize, and handle business. There are even fast food style counters where Romans could grab a quick bite to eat. As we moved deeper into the site, we began stepping into the courtyards and homes that once belonged to wealthy merchants and elite families. These houses are some of the most striking parts of Pompeii, with open atriums, garden spaces, and rooms that still hold fragments of daily life frozen in time. Many of the walls are covered in remarkably well-preserved frescoes, with vivid reds, yellows, and deep blues still visible after nearly 2,000 years. You can actually see early uses of perspective with landscapes designed to create a sense of depth and space. This use of perspective did not re-emerge until centuries later during the Renaissance. Here is an old bakery where you can still see the stone grain mills and ovens, and nearby a tavern where people gathered to socialize. The one spot that had quite a long line during our visit to Pompeii, and one of the most talked about spots, was the ancient brothel. It's quite small inside with tiny individual rooms, just enough for a simple stone bed. Above the doorways are preserved frescoes that are thought to indicate services available back in Roman times. One of the most powerful parts are the casts of people. When archaeologists discovered voids left in the ash, they poured plaster in to capture the final shapes of the victims in their last moments. Being here, history stops feeling so distant and connects you to the lives and routines frozen in a single moment in time. We took the train just a few stops, but it genuinely felt like stepping into a completely different world, to Atlantis. Unlike the busy atmosphere of Pompeii, we had this entire place to ourselves. Entry was half price with our 3-day pass, so we paid about $8 each. As you come upon the pool area, you start to understand the scale and extravagance of this seaside estate belonging to the Roman elite, likely to the wife of Emperor Nero. The frescoes here are also remarkably preserved, with vibrant scenes still visible on the walls of rooms that once would have been filled with life. Walking through after Pompeii, it really felt like seeing the same story from a completely different perspective. Same history, but totally different experience of it. Something to ponder as we climb the stairs back to our little palace. The next day, we used the 3rd day of our pass to explore the incredible Royal Palace of Caserta. With the discount, entry was about $8 per person. This massive palace was built in the 18th century for the Bourbon kings of Naples and was designed to rival Versailles. We started by climbing the grand staircase toward the Palatine Chapel, with its elegant arches and refined detail that set the tone for the rest of the palace. From there, we explored a fascinating exhibit focused on the queens of Italy and their influence through the centuries, highlighting how many of them played key roles in shaping culture, education, and court life. It was really an interesting reminder that behind all the grandeur and power, there were also figures quietly shaping society in lasting ways. Next, we wandered into the royal apartments. Room after room stretch out in sequence, each one more ornate than the last. You move through grand salons with soaring ceilings, walls covered in frescoes, gilded stucco work, and massive chandeliers that feel like they belong in a theater rather than a home. Some rooms feel formal and ceremonial, like they were made for audiences and state affairs, while others are slightly more intimate, but still unbelievably decorated. It doesn't feel like touring a home so much as moving through a small city built entirely for royalty. Then we moved out to explore the grounds and quickly realized just how massive they really are. The garden stretches for kilometers behind the palace, so we opted for the shuttle bus to reach the far end. There we arrived at the dramatic Grand Waterfall. Part of an engineered water system designed in the 18th century, it was fed by an extensive aqueduct system built specifically to supply the palace complex. From there, we explored the sprawling English-style gardens. Hidden throughout were little surprises like the small pyramid, classical style ruins, scattered statues, and tucked away viewpoints that make the whole landscape feel like an outdoor stage. One of the most interesting features was the grotto-like area with its artificial pond and faux ruins, a fashionable style in European landscape design at the time. The grounds even have greenhouses and a small plant shop where you can buy pieces of the garden to take home with you, which felt like a very charming touch. The whole estate just felt enormous and beautifully designed. After making our way back down, we took the train and caught a glimpse of Mount Vesuvius rising in the distance. We enjoyed a drink while waiting for Pizzeria de Attilio to open for dinner. As we made our way towards this popular little pizza place, it was clear to see we weren't the only ones with this idea. Once inside, it was easy to see why this place was so popular. The pizza was simple but dialed in with that classic Neapolitan dough and rich, fresh toppings. But the standout for us was the ricotta stuffed crust, which takes an already great pizza to the next level of richness. Creamy, warm ricotta tucked into the edge of that soft, blistered crust, basically impossible not to finish every bite. We topped it all off with a few bites of dessert to end another amazing day in Naples.
This is our last day in Napoli, and so we decided to do a walk around the city, and we're gonna look at a bunch of castles and just see what we see.
The first castle we visited was Castel San Elmo, a massive star-shaped fortress sitting high above the city. Entry was about $6 per person. It dates back to the 14th century and was later rebuilt by the Spanish in the 16th century as a military stronghold designed to keep control over Naples thanks to its commanding position. While you can't go inside the old interior rooms, the real highlight is walking along the outer ramparts and the edge of the castle wall. From up there, you get these incredible panoramic views stretching across the entire city, the bay, and out towards Mount Vesuvius in the distance. It's one of those spots where the structure itself is impressive, but the views are what really steal the show. It was interesting seeing some of the older buildings held together with visible steel cables and supports, a practical reminder that cities as old as these are constantly balancing beauty and just keeping things standing a little longer. We made our way back down, and when I say down, I mean way down. We descended from the hills above Naples towards sea level, dropping roughly 600 feet in elevation, which translates to a long, stair-heavy walk that feels like it just keeps going and going through the neighborhoods and narrow streets. All those steps eventually brought us to Castel Nuovo, the iconic medieval castle right in the center of the city near the harbor. Built in the 13th century, it's one of Naples' most recognizable landmarks with its dramatic stone towers and triumphal arch entrance. The entry price was a little steep at almost $20 per person, so we opted to just enjoy the outside. And because you can never have too much pizza in Naples, we opted for lunch at a tiny local place serving folded, wallet-style margherita pizza. We wandered through town, slowly making our way towards the water. We stopped briefly at the Fontana del Gigante, a striking 17th century fountain. From there, we continued along the waterfront to our final castle stop, Castel dell'Ovo. It's the oldest standing fortification in Naples, and even though it was closed when we visited, it was still incredibly impressive from the outside, sitting right on the edge of the sea with waves crashing against the stone walls and views stretching across the bay. It was the perfect way to end an amazing week in Naples.